because this guest is a very special guest. You know, the Chamber's been around since 1974, and recently we moved, and we are now, our home is at Barry University. And I have the Vice Provost of Continued Education, Mr. David Kopp. David, how are you?
Doing well, thanks.
I think I may have said that wrong in terms of the department. It is continued education, right?
Well, it's extended learning.
Extended learning.
Which includes continuing ed and graduate studies, right?
Right. Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You know, and I have to say thank you to Barry. We had been downtown in offices for about 14 years, and where we were, they're actually getting ready to knock down the building, which is on an entire city block, and put up, from what I understand, one of the tallest buildings south of New York. So we had to find a new home, and we reached out to Barry, and you all were so kind enough to house us over at the university. We are excited for being there, and being there with you with extended learning is very important. First of all, let's find out a little bit about you.
Well, I like walks on the beach, my favorite color. Actually, you probably don't want to know that. Well, I was in the private sector in human resources in Los Angeles and Charlotte before getting into academia. But the part I enjoyed the most was kind of training and developing employees. So that kind of translated into pursuing my doctorate and going into academia about 25 years ago, when this was all jet black.
Okay.
Not so much anymore. So I've been with Barry now. I'm celebrating my 20th year, in fact.
Oh, wow.
So they can't get rid of me.
Okay. And extended learning, I know we've had the opportunity to talk a little bit about what it is that you do. And before we go there, Barry University, it's been around quite a long time. What are some of the other areas that people can engage in as far as furthering their education?
Well, you're right. First of all, we were founded in 1940 by the Adrian Dominican sisters, and we are a liberal arts college, but with a lot of programs that are nationally, if not world-renowned, like our nursing program, and we have a law school education as well as business, as you know.
Right.
As far as extended learning goes, the mission is really just that. It's an extension of the traditional pathway that a student may follow in getting a traditional degree. So literally and symbolically, we're outside of Miami shores. We have locations in Jacksonville and Melbourne, as well as Pembroke Pines. So the mission, I would say, would be for those that perhaps don't follow a traditional trajectory in getting a 4-year degree, for instance. There may be folks out there that had a little college 20 years ago and want to finish up. We certainly accommodate that scenario, as well as professional development, and as you mentioned, continuing ed for those folks that may not want a degree, but they want certifications and some professional development in their careers.
Right. So again, so a person comes to you, how does that process work? And who do you find coming to you? Who are those individuals that are coming back to you to extend or continue and build on their careers?
Well, it varies. I will say that Barry, our wheelhouse, we are a minority-serving institution, and following our core values, we have a lot of first-generation students. So many students are going into college and experiencing the college phenomenon for the first time. But a traditional student is usually a non-traditional student that would come. It would be someone, as I say, that maybe wants to finish his or her degree. It may be someone who wants to do some professional development and maybe get what we call a micro-credential or a badge. So we do try to market and advertise that option for the non-traditional student as well, especially in Miami, where we have our base, where we share the building with you.
Right. And I know that you have quite a bit, I guess, of foreign students that come to Barry.
Yeah, I think last I looked, over 80 countries were represented. Wow. Of folks that are coming from other countries. I will say that after COVID and the pandemic, there was a sea change in all of higher ed, including Barry, on the way we deliver the information. As you know, many organizations, including Barry, got an infrastructure to support online learning,
Right.
and e-learning, and many of our meetings now are done on Zoom versus
In person.
So we have pivoted to that modality for folks that want to pursue either their degree or some type of credential from their comfort of their home, so to speak.
Right, right. So, and you talk about, obviously online learning has been around for quite a while, but a lot of institutions, as you said, with the pandemic, had to pivot and shift. How long have you been doing online?
Well, in some form, we've been doing it for many years. I think it crystallized because of COVID and getting new infrastructure and COVID funds. I think we have an expert person leading our online learning, and we really have developed the software and the hardware over the last couple of years. So I think right now we probably, I would say all of our programs have some type of online component, whereas perhaps 5-10 years ago it was strictly face-to-face, come to the building every Thursday night at 5:50 type of thing.
Right, right, right. So again, when I think about extended learning and trying to understand or wrap my head around that, so you have a 4-year degree and you have a master's program, you have doctorate program.
That's right.
So how does extended learning work with those programs or degrees?
Well,
Or how does it differ?
right, and there are a couple of ways it could differ. First of all, it could be location-based. In other words, if it's not in Miami Shores, and let's say someone's taking a course in Jacksonville or Melbourne, that would be, in our world, extended learning, 'cause we're
Okay.
extending from the main campus. And also, it would be someone who maybe is between degrees, perhaps between their bachelor's and master's, and want to do a post-bac certificate in programming, or even how to fly a drone. I know we have one of those as a professional development, believe it or
Oh,
not.
okay.
Because I know a lot of realtors use that now for
Right.
some of their showings. So it does vary. The first crossroads would be, do you want to pursue a degree, or you want something non-credit, for instance?
Okay. And I know, obviously, again, we've had conversations of reference to Bahamas.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about that and how that got started. I know we have a rather large Bahamian community here, not just Bahamian, obviously many foreign communities here, Jamaican, Haitian, Colombian.
That's right.
And the list goes on. But I know you started a doctorate program in the Bahamas. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and I can give credit to the lady who started, who's the dean of our education, Dr. Jill Farrell. Had some leads out on island, and about 7 or 8 years ago actually pursued those leads, and it crystallized into folks being interested in taking the Barry degree in Nassau and in Freeport, in places that I'm sure you know, where we're conducting the degree. So we've been there about, I believe, 8 or 9 years, and we do offer master's and doctoral programs. As I say, the model now is a little more subtle in the sense that while the professors would fly out every other weekend, let's say, there may be a couple of weeks where they do it online and
Okay.
beam into Nassau or Freeport. So it's an exciting venture, and we love collaborating with the Bahamas and their government officials in education.
Right. Now, when I think about, obviously, Miami, I guess some may say it's not a college town in the sense of your northern schools that are more college or town oriented. In terms of, obviously, South Florida high schools, how does that come into play with your engagement with, I don't know whether to say recruiting or getting students from our local community to attend Barry?
Well, it's a fair point in the sense that we actively recruit from the schools. We have a dual enrollment program where actually
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in their junior and senior year, they could start taking some courses towards college credit. And we also have a emergency management service program with the high schools if they're interested in being paramedics or EMTs, for instance.
Right.
So a lot of our recruiting comes from those initiatives as well. But like other institutions, we have a admissions and recruiting department. Then they go to different states and different fairs and different educational forums. We do have, I think the number I saw, 20 or 30,000 alums over the last 75, 80 years. So we are well represented in all the states. So I know frequently we have alumni meetings in various states as well.
Okay. And another big area of support or engagement with schools, obviously, is athletics. And I know that you are very engaged with athletics. I believe you tennis, golf. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we have several sports where we've won titles in our division, and with all schools, the focusing on the athletics and athletes, they tend to be, just because of their support systems, they tend to also be very good students as well. So we try to enhance that recruiting. We have, as I say, coaches that in soccer as well. We're always out recruiting. So I think if you look it up, Barry's done pretty well in our division, and there are a lot of victory cloths around the gymnasium.
Right. And what's the future look like for Barry University?
I'm optimistic. I think we've all gone through the trauma of COVID.
Yeah, before you go there, talk about that a little bit. And how did you pivot, and how did you really make that transition or deal with the transition of COVID?
Well, it was emerging. We have great leadership at the top. I'm not just talking about myself, but we basically, following CDC guidelines, of course,
Right.
we kept the communication up with the students. We obviously were very flexible in the delivery of the courses. We made sure that for those folks, this becomes a digital equity issue, those folks that perhaps didn't have laptops and access to internet, we made sure that they did. So we took care of our students during that time in the sense of being very flexible. And as far as the health protocols, we had a crack team that went over each of the protocols, making sure that everyone was safe, obviously. So it was like all organizations, it took some pivoting, some flexibility, and really it's a new world in the sense that many professors who never taught online were teaching online for the first time. Okay. And we know that not all good face-to-face professors are necessarily, so we had great training. We spent a lot of time in training professors to do online with the rigor that our students expect.
So, and not, being entrenched or part of it, were students attending class, or were classes just like shut down?
There was a period when the campus was shut down due to the state of COVID, and then we started easing into optional. You can either do it face-to-face, or you can beam in from your home, for instance. Depending on what the student felt comfortable with. If for students that had pre-existing conditions, for instance, we made sure that they weren't exposed to anything. But I think it was really a transition, and as you and I have talked about, fortunately it's sunsetting now, and we're getting back to somewhat of normal operations, but there will be a legacy in the sense that we have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of the students and professors really enjoyed the online experience, and it's not going away anytime soon.
Right. So speaking of not going away anytime soon, we talked a little bit about the future. So what does the future look like?
Well, I think as far as Barry's concerned, I think per our investment and our training and development that we'll have the modality of online and hybrid from here on. I mean, that will be part of how we recruit. And especially with the new generation of students, it's something that they really demand now. So I think the future is good. I think higher education has always had its challenges because as you and I know, there's always been talk about the value of a four-year degree versus the cost of it. And we're always grappling with that as an industry. But that is the Barry difference. I mean, that's our pitch as far as we treat the students and their individual circumstances very personally, so they're not just a number, and we take great pride in that.
Yeah. Talk about opportunities for scholarship.
Well, they're varied depending on the category. For instance, I know we have scholarships now for those that are interested in mortgage banking, for instance.
Okay.
It's a fully funded scholarship that we're starting in the spring. As you've talked about, we have athletic scholarships as well as honor society type of scholarships and grants. So they're very varied. We have a department that is dedicated to grants and scholarships. And most of our students are Pell eligible as far as the government funding some of the cost of tuition. So it's something that a student could look forward to upon applying to Barry, that they have a counselor that talks about some of their options and scholarships that perhaps they should apply for.
Right. So if there was one thing you wanted to leave the audience with a reference to Barry, what would that be?
Well, reminding folks that Barry, we're an institution here that's been here 82 years, and willing, ready, and able to help them with any of their educational aspirations, whether it's non-credit or for credit. And if they want some counseling on how to get a micro badge or some type of certificate towards their current career, we're here to help.
Micro badge. Explain that a little bit before we go.
Yeah, a micro credential or micro badge would be just a system that would acknowledge that you have a specialized knowledge in something, whether it's technology or Microsoft or some type of certification. And many times that is what employers are looking for, something that you can use Monday morning, so to speak, and we offer those types of credentials.
So how can someone get in touch and learn more about Barry?
Sure. Well, the quickest way is barry.edu. Get on our website. They can reach me personally at my email, which is D as in David, KOPP @barry.edu. And depending on what their needs are, I can get them to the right person if it's not me.
Right, right. David, thank you so much. You know, if you want to learn more about the Miami-Dade Chamber, you can go to m-dcc.org or call the Chamber at 305-751-8648. This has been the Chamber Connection. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Member Connection. Yeah, this is the guy that's excited on Monday mornings at noon because we have some amazing guests that comes in and share some amazing information, and today is no different. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, I was reading your bio, and former officer.
Yeah, Officer Candidate School.
Officer Candidate School, yeah, OCS.
Yes.
Yeah, I went to, I was not an officer, but I was at Bragg.
Okay.
And I was at Benning, where they had OCS.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell us a little about that whole process.
Sure.
For those folks who don't know what OCS is.
Sure. So OCS is Officer Candidate School. The different branches of the military all have their own variation of it.
Right.
I was enlisted in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And about a year in, I was selected for OCS. I took my necessary tests and I went to Quantico, Virginia, where I completed both legs of the training. I decided not to commission.
Okay.
I wanted to go into the business sector, and I found that if I was going to commission, flying planes, and while I thought all of that is what I really wanted to do, I had a change of heart.
Okay.
And so I did not commission to be an officer.
Okay. Okay. But that's, I'm telling you, you don't just have that opportunity. Like you said, you had to be selected. So thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
City permit.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that. I know you said you worked in corporate for a while.
Sure.
Then you decided to get out on your own.
Sure. Sure. I stumbled across it somewhat as an accident. I was working in corporate for Geico Insurance Company, and it wasn't really my cup of tea, but I was doing okay. And then I got into bartending. I was faced with a challenge of, I did well in school, but I was like, school's not for me. I don't want to go back and do the master's route or get some kind of professional certification. So what's the most amount of money I can make without a cert? And that's how I stumbled across bartending. But in bartending, I would meet a lot of people.
Okay.
And one day I got a phone call to see if I was available during day hours to run a permit for a pipeline of natural gas. And it was running all the way down through Pennsylvania, through Maryland, and into Virginia.
Wow.
And I said, well, sure, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. A pipeline running from Pennsylvania down through Virginia. That's pretty big.
Yeah, and it was a big project. The plans were real thick. Like they were the size of like a loaf of bread rolled up. And I was looking at the plans, and it all looked like Chinese to me, but the pay was great, and it was day hours, and I didn't have to deal with drunk people. And so I found, okay, this is great. How do I replicate this? How do I duplicate this? And that's where City Permit was born.
Okay.
I started by going door to door, really with trade contractors, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and a lot of doors slammed on my face. A lot of didn't you see the sign? No solicitation. Get out of here. Architects and engineers are a little bit more civil. They're easier to deal with, but the strategy worked because 6 months later, 3 months later, there would invariably be a problem with their permitting. Either their expediter quit, or their permit was wrong, or they had an emergency situation where they needed a permit by Monday and it's Friday afternoon, and they would call me and ask me if I was still doing it. And that was kind of my time to shine.
Right.
And so from there, I was able to establish a bit of a presence in the DC metro area.
Okay.
And I went from getting like the scraps and kind of the jobs that nobody wanted to bigger and better projects, and then commercial projects as well, from the residential work that I started doing.
So what is, like you said, you would have folks who permit was messed up,
Right.
or there were challenges.
Right.
What makes city permit an asset to someone?
Absolutely. I get that question all the time. What's our value add?
Yeah.
If I could just do it myself, you're quoting me the similar timeframes that are on the website. You're not really saving me any money on the permit fees that are assessed by the municipality. What's in it for me? And I relate it to people in a way that something that we all maybe have had an experience with or see on TV is the court system. You can go into the court system by yourself and represent yourself pro se. You can try to file motions and subpoenas and gather evidence and present it. Will you do well? Maybe. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not as well as if you had a lawyer representing you.
Right.
And that's what I equate us to. We're your expert, we're your advocate, we're your attorney, if you will, but in the permit world. We speak their language and we know what forms you need. A lot of the information is on the websites, and the cities and counties have done a much better job over the years of modernizing their websites and making them more user-friendly. But it wouldn't be government if they didn't fall short in some aspects here and there due to budgetary constraints or talent or whatever it might be. And so a lot of times, we hear stories of people that have tried to do it themselves, and it's their third or fourth or fifth crack at it while managing a family, while working full-time. And now instead of their project starting in August, it's starting in December.
So what are some of those challenges that make that happen?
Challenges can be as simple as something as you go to submit and you don't have a notice of commencement on file. Especially down here in Florida, notice of commencements are pretty much required on almost any project.
Okay.
It varies by county, but the dollar amount is so low that there's really not a whole lot you can do without it. Well, if you don't file it, it'll set you back. And that's something that you have to file with the courthouse. It has to be notarized. They often want a wet ink signature. Some municipalities are accepting a third-party verifiable signature like DocuSign or Adobe Sign. But if you don't fill that out properly, or if you submit it, maybe you just signed it in like Microsoft Paint and you thought that was sufficient, it can cause issues. Another issue can be something as simple as a lot of the systems they use, there's like 3 systems that all the municipalities use nationwide, and they all really interface the same, but they usually talk to their portal. So you'll make your application in the portal native to your home, but then you have to accept an invite from an e-plan review service like Project Docs. It's by Evolve. A lot of people, they don't accept the invite. They register, they submit everything, they upload, the invite comes and they think they accept it, but they don't. It's a two-step system. So you have to accept it, and then you have to resubmit it, push the task back to the city. A lot of people just accept it, and then they're sitting there for a couple weeks. A week maybe turns into a month or two, and they're wondering, why has nothing happened? Why am I not getting any movement on my project? And it could just be something as simple as not knowing which buttons to click. There's other things that are more complicated. When you talk about challenges, paying filing fees up front, a lot of people don't necessarily understand when they're doing their project how expensive some of these permit fees can be. Building permits, planning and zoning, those are one of the major revenue generators for municipalities.
Wow.
It's right next to probably the DMV and traffic ticket citation.
So I know that a lot of homeowners, they do self-permitting.
Right.
But like you said, if you don't know what you're doing, basically you can find yourself in some situations.
Right, right.
Talk about that a little bit.
A lot of times what will happen with our homeowners is they'll pull a permit, and the city or the municipality is not going to tell you, hey, for what you're doing, you need all of these permits. You might find that rock star employee that will say, and they'll pull you to the side and really take their time and explain. But a lot of it is they're getting slammed with applications
Right.
Day in and day out, and they just don't have the manpower, the bandwidth to really sit down and dig deep into each application. So you might be doing a deck, a patio, a trellis, and a swimming pool, and you thought you could all put it on a building permit, but you didn't realize that you needed a separate deck permit. Depending on the municipality, you might need a separate swimming pool permit. So you get out there, you have your building permit, you think everything's good to go, and maybe your neighbor doesn't like you because you're starting right at 7 or right at 8 a.m., depending on your ordinances, and they call, and the inspector comes out and they see, okay, well, you have your building permit, but where's your swimming pool permit? I see they're digging a foundation for a pool, and I see the post for the deck. Where's the deck permit?
Right.
Oh, no, it's all right here. I have everything here. Here's the plans. They'll shut your job down.
Wow.
You know.
And I know a lot of times, like you said, homeowner may decide to put up a fence
Right.
without a permit.
Right.
So what happens in those instances?
It depends. If the fence is where it's supposed to be, then it can stay. And what I mean by where it's supposed to be is there's setbacks.
Right.
You know, it has to be X amount of feet from the property line, it has to be X amount of feet from the side of the structure, from the front of the structure, from the rear. If there's accessory structures that are already existing, think like an efficiency or a shed, perhaps. It can't be but so close or so far. And then it has to be a certain height. You know, a lot of people put up an 8-foot concrete block wall, and that's not legal where they're
Right.
at. So ultimately what happens is you have to tear it down.
Oh, wow.
You have to tear it down. And that's why it's, or you build over your property line and now you're on your neighbor's property.
Okay.
And so you either have to go with your neighbor and see if they'll grant you an easement, which most neighbors won't because they want their property line to be where it is.
Right, because then they got an issue.
And then you have to move your fence or your wall, or you might use the wrong material, an unpermitted material. And so essentially what can happen is you can spend a lot of money and end up spending it again to do it right.
Right. Now, I've heard the term open permit.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been closed, but the work has been done. Or talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, open permits. So Miami-Dade and greater South Florida, but especially Miami-Dade County, is the #1 county for open permits and permit violations. Of Miami-Dade County, it's the city of Hialeah. That's #1 in the nation for like fraud and open permits and violation. But what happens is an open permit is when they pull the permit, they go through the plan review process, it's approved and issued, and then you have to call in a series of inspections that coincide with the progress of the work. Often, a foundation, framing, you'll have your rough in, close in, and then somewhere along there you'll have a final. Well, the contractor, for whatever reason, will only call in maybe 2 or 3 of the inspections, and the remaining 4 or 5 will be missing. And most importantly, the final. You can't get a final without your other inspections. And so what happens is this permit's open. Where we most often find out about open permits or as-built, permit violations is when you're going to transfer ownership of the house during the sale. Just a high-stress scenario already. People have a closing date. They can't touch their finances. There's often a loan involved. And open permits just slow that process down, and that's where we find out, usually because the title company will pull the address and the deed and find out, hey, there's all these permits and they were never closed.
What happens when someone does a job without a permit, but let's say the work was done correctly?
Okay.
How does that come into play?
Well, what would happen is what's supposed to happen is an inspector will come out. Oftentimes you might have to make small holes in the walls or in the structure to see if the work was actually done correctly. And then you can patch them up later. And then you submit plans. They're called as-built plans.
Okay.
So you have to get an engineer or an architect to come out there and draw what's been done, which is usually more expensive because they're going back behind and they're doing a lot of guesswork. They have to send out people to do actual manual site hours and survey. You're going to pay more fines to the city because you were supposed to get the permit up front. So often there's an 100% or 200% fine that's levied. But if the work is done to code, then you patch it up and you get your permit, pay your fines, and you can move about your business.
I know you mentioned Hialeah being probably the most notorious for having open permits or doing non-permitted work. How does that happen? Are just people just figure they?
Yeah, they just do it, and we do permitting all over the country, and we see that a lot of it depends on enforcement. There's certain things that you can get away with in South Florida that other parts of the country have taken a real stance on. I know DC, for example, they recently raised their stop work order fine from $2,500 per job site to $4,000 per infraction.
What does that mean?
So what would used to happen is, let's say you built a whole bunch of stuff on your property, you did a full gut reno, and you went to sell it. Well, you just pay the $2,500. It was faster anyway, right? Because you didn't have to deal with the permit office, and your profit margins are still looking really well. Now they changed it so each infraction has a fee attached to it. So it's not just, oh, I did all this work. It's, well, you had no electrical, no mechanical, no plumbing. And it's like almost like getting pulled over and getting a ticket. Before you know it, you might have 100 infractions, $4,000 a pop. They want $400,000.
Wow.
And they'll send MPD and they'll shut down your job, and then you have to go to an office of administrative hearings, and it's very formalized. And oftentimes you don't end up paying the full amount. You can settle, you can claim, you didn't know, you were misinformed, and you can negotiate it down or show goodwill. But the enforcement aspect has created a lot more, it's created a culture where people are, no, I want to do this right. I don't want to deal with the repercussions. Where down here, we're not seeing as strong a enforcement action. Okay. And we're not seeing the same types of fines. We're not seeing the same type of stringent plan review. So it just depends. But yeah, it starts with the constituents.
Well, you talk about down here, and obviously you said D.C. and you're doing business throughout the United States.
Yes.
So it's not just here based locally in Miami.
No. So we're headquartered here out of Miami, but yeah, we service almost every major metropolitan city in the United States.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
Well, I know that obviously Florida, with obviously the impact of hurricanes, permitting has changed a bit. How has that changed your business in terms of what has been required?
It's been positive for our business. So anytime there's more regulation, there's a little bit more confusion, and that makes us more valuable. Okay. The additional regulation also ensures better safety. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in Florida in terms of the recent hurricanes and the damage that they're causing, those buildings are built long before these new building codes have been instituted. The Florida Building Code is actually one of the most strict in the country and in the world to withstand the Category 5 hurricane. So the structures here that are being built now are probably some of the safest in the world. Right. And we're finding that it's making us more of an essential part of the project team. A lot of times an expediter or a permit processor is not really considered. You'll have your code consultants, you'll have your architect and their consultants in terms of design, but it's you don't really need it maybe. But as things become more strict, you find that no, you better get an expert. So
what is the difference with you and, as you said, an expediter?
We're essentially the same thing. Okay. I've taken a different approach to it. I want to be a full service, one-stop shop. Okay. Permitting consultant or pre-construction consultant. So we offer additional services. We're certified. A lot of expediters aren't. We hold certifications both from the International Code Council, but also from our local, state, and federal counterparts. So like SBAA, Hub Zone, the FMSDC, things that set us apart to show that we're the real deal. We're an actual firm.
FSMDC, my good friend Beatrice. Have you
Yes.
you gotten engaged with?
Yes, absolutely. Beatrice is great.
That's great. That's great. So before we close out, what would you like to tell our audience? How can they find out more about you, and how can they get engaged?
Sure. I would encourage them to go to our website. It's www.citypermit.us/contact.
Okay.
They can put in their information. We're not going to harass you. You're not going to be on a mailing list. But give us your information. Let us know what project you're looking at, and we'll give you a free estimate. And at the very least, you'll leave knowing what permits you need versus trying to do it haphazardly and figure it out on your own.
Okay. And a phone number?
Yeah, our phone number, at least locally, is 305-908-1142.
Okay. Well, this has been the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Member Connection. If you want to know more about the Chamber, you can go to 305-751-8648 or m-dcc.org. This has been the Member Connection. Hi, and welcome back to the Member Connection. Yeah, I'm that excited guy that's sitting in this seat talking about some exciting things, and this is really exciting. Some of you probably have thought about it, wondered how you can get into it, but here we got somebody here today to tell you all about it. Mr. Campbell, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Great,
man. The franchise executive.
Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Where are you from, first of all?
Born and raised in New York, but then basically spent most of my time down here in South Florida.
Okay.
So I've in Broward County, so I'm pretty much a Floridian.
Okay. And doing a little reading, I think your background is finance.
That is correct. That is correct. Started in the financial industry, services industry. I was a financial advisor with Edward Jones and Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
And I started back in 2009, actually.
Okay.
Anyone that knows that, the crisis of 2008, and I was actually doing investment sales in 2009, and it was a really, really tough time, but I learned to be resilient, and it taught me a lot about the business and a lot about being a good entrepreneur.
Right.
So it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, I heard something a few days ago, and I know I'm not saying it quite right, but basically saying that people who are successful, they know how to make it through the tough times, because tough times are going to come regardless. You're going to find situations that you may think that you're not going to get out of it, but you can't give up.
Exactly.
So like you said, starting out in 2009, right at the height of the crash and the financial crisis, so you made it through that. And how did you, as I was introducing, we all see these franchises out here. I go to, throw one out, I go to Smoothie King all the time.
Right.
And obviously it's pretty successful franchise, and then obviously the big ones that we talk about, the Burger Kings, the McDonald's of the world.
Right.
Talk about franchise, and how did you get into the business?
So basically, as a financial advisor, one of the things that I was doing is that I wanted to basically own my own business.
Okay.
Being a financial advisor, you do own your own clients and your books to a certain degree, but you don't necessarily own the business.
Right.
And I wanted to get into that. I've always been an entrepreneur since day one.
Okay.
So what I started doing was looking at opportunities to own businesses. I'd owned independent businesses in the past. However, I knew that franchising was going to give me kind of the playbook that I needed in order to be successful. So I started researching different areas. And one of the areas that came up was property and casualty insurance.
Okay.
I thought it was a great industry. It's a good in terms of long-term longevity. I then acquired a Brightway Insurance in Parkland, Florida. Acquired that. We actually moved that. It was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, moved it to Parkland, hired staff, and then I learned that business. I grew that business for about 4 years, and then I sold it.
Okay.
And then that was my first taste of franchising, and I loved it because you weren't operating by yourself. You also had a team, you had the support of the franchisor, which is basically kind of the corporate office individuals that are helping you to be successful. What I did from there is that I was looking for other franchises, and I Then I went into a swimming pool franchise.
Okay.
Because I got a little bit more adventurous. A totally different industry, totally different business. It took a little bit longer to learn that.
Right.
Got into that. And then I decided that it wasn't going to be the best for me. So I
Okay.
learned that. So from there.
I know, not to cut you off.
Yeah,
I know I'm always calling my pool people saying, hey, you need to send somebody over because they didn't get the pool clean right.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part that wasn't the most pleasant. So I essentially scaled out of that as well and sold that business as well right before COVID. So we went through the COVID period and we decided that we're looking at other areas. And I knew that franchising was it for me. Independent business was kind of just something that I found that it requires so much more because you're starting everything from scratch. In franchising, they're providing you with the name brand, they're providing you with the policies and procedures, the trial and error, they're providing you with all the things that I believe that you need in order to give you that foot up to be successful. So once looking for a new franchise, I decided that, you know what, since I've done this so many years, why not help others navigate this
Okay.
space? And that's how I got in, and I started the franchise executive. The franchise executive is basically a franchise brokerage where I have alliances with over 300 franchises, and I assist people in navigating the space. And number one, finding out if franchising is good for them. And then number two, finding out what kind of model based on their capital requirements, their time commitment is going to be best for them.
What you just said, time commitment, because a lot of people look at franchising as probably an easy way to get into business, but not necessarily so, because like you said, the time commitment. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that is key. Many times what happens is that individuals think that franchise is all about food, quick service restaurants.
Right, that's exactly.
That's it,
And
you
there's
know.
so many different.
Oh man, quick service restaurants is probably 10% of the business now.
Okay.
Probably 20, 25 years ago, it was a lot different. But QSRs, quick service restaurants, it's totally different these days. Basically from there, that the other 90% encompasses various industries, electrical, plumbing, AC, internet consulting, even fundraising franchise.
Fundraising franchise?
Fundraising
Really?
franchises.
Talk about that a little bit,
you name
because I'm always fundraising. I mean, running a chamber, you're always doing it.
So
talk about that a little
yeah.
bit.
So I represent a company that I have access to a company that does fundraising for high school sports.
Okay.
And one of the things as a franchisee is that you have a preset territory, and in that preset territory, you have X amount of schools that you're able to work with their athletic directors to raise funds for the program.
Okay.
And the way how the franchisee, which is always the next question, is how do I make any money?
Because you're
right?
making the money, you're raising the money for the
Exactly.
school.
But actually the way how it works is each dollar, a percentage of each dollar goes to the franchisee for the work of raising the funds. Okay. So it becomes a perpetual thing as well, because as you have multiple sports, you have soccer, you have football, you have lacrosse, et cetera, within those schools, then every time the new year begins, you just start fundraising all over with those parents and adding new parents on them.
Right,
So
right.
it's a huge industry. There's huge opportunities there. And to go back to your questions on time commitment, the whole key with time commitment is I work with individuals who are looking for 100% passive, meaning they have a full-time career.
Right.
And they're looking for something in additional. And I mean 100% where it's managed by the corporate. And then we have the individuals who are looking for something just an additional, just a supplement income. And then we have the ones that are looking full-time owner-operators. So
Right.
full gamut.
And I know that one of the biggest, and I don't know, I can't sit here and say the fastest growing, but I know the lines are forever. And you probably know what I'm talking about, Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
That what I heard is that they give you, what, you can own it for 10 years or something like that? Am I right in saying that?
There's a contractual obligation for a certain amount of time period.
Right.
However, what many people don't know is Chick-fil-A is not the standard franchise. You cannot sell back your location. You're an owner operator. So it's almost like a licensee model, which is a little bit different. And there's some other models like that, like Avis does that as well.
Okay.
Hertz, I think, does that as well.
Okay.
So what happens in those models is that you basically become an owner operator. You get a percentage of the net profit, right?
Right.
But the asset is never yours.
Okay.
you can never sell back your Chick-fil-A. Corporate always owns that.
Okay.
The franchises I deal with, the asset is yours. When I had my property and casualty agency, I decided to sell that to whoever I could.
Okay.
And I wanted to. So those are just a little bit nuances. But to add your point, it's a great model because yes, the lines are huge and it's a moneymaker, top moneymaker.
And again, I don't think people realize, as you even mentioned the whole thing about nonprofit, having a franchise in a nonprofit or the fundraising arena. And most people think of, again, the fast foods, the McDonald's and the Burger Kings of the world, but you got State Farm, you have a number.
Right.
Talk about some of those underlying businesses that people don't even think about.
Yeah, so the fundraising is definitely one. Digital marketing consulting franchises are available now, which is huge. And any business owner that you deal with has to deal with marketing.
Okay.
And digital marketing.
So how does that one work?
So that one works basically as a digital marketing consultant where basically you have access to multiple vendors that handle, for instance, pay-per-click, they'll handle the SEM, social search engine areas. And then what your job is to be the consultant, is to go and get the business.
Okay.
So you're talking to various businesses, to the electrical business, the plumbing business, about handling their marketing, their digital marketing. And as you're getting that, then you have a vendor on the back end, which the franchisor provides, that does the actual work.
Okay.
And that's a great model as well because it's a recurring revenue model. And as we know, digital marketing for every business will not change. I do not foresee that changing.
Right.
That's a huge one.
Now, it all sounds, like cake and ice cream. It's exciting.
Right.
You get a franchise. Talk about the other side of franchising.
Right.
The challenging side of it.
Well, there's challenging sides to all businesses. However, the challenging sides to franchise, I think, is first understanding yourself as an individual and understanding, like we mentioned, time commitment, right? How much time do you really want? Many people, they walk by and they say, well, I want a quick service restaurant because it's making a ton of money. Okay, the next question I ask them when they come to me as a client, I said, well, let me ask you something. Do you want to be on call 24/7? And then they said, well, why would you say that? Well, any restaurant business, the opening hours are from usually 6, like a Chick-fil-A, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. There's prep time prior, and then there's close time after. And you're 6 days on a Chick-fil-A. A standard QSR is going to be 7 days.
Right.
And what happens, even on a Planet Smoothie model, is when your employees decide that they no longer want to show up, who has to go in there? You do. And if you don't, then there's going to be an issue with you not opening your store, which can also backtrack there.
Right.
So understanding who you are and what you want in terms of your time commitment is one. Another thing, understanding you as an individual. How are you? Do you want to be? Are you the type of person that likes networking? Right? There's franchises that are great for that. If you do not like networking, there's going to be other models that are going to be better fit for that. For example, I have a client in Atlanta right now. He's retiring as an educator. And when he came to me and he said, listen, Andre, profit is not necessarily the main focus, but passion is huge for me because I'm a drama teacher and I still want to help out individuals. So I started looking for franchises that I had access to that work within drama in those areas. So he's actually going to be starting next year helping kids in the drama and in that space. So it's not necessarily all about the fast food or the heavy profit, but it could be a huge niche for any individual that's trying to really fulfill their passion.
And you have to excuse me
No, sure.
with this cough.
No problem.
The other area that's important when it comes to franchising is obviously the cost to enter the market. Talk about that a little bit.
Cost can be a huge barrier for some. However, once again, when you work with someone like myself and my company as a franchise consultant, one of the things that's part of our vetting process, we talk to you about your capital, your liquid capital that you have available, as well as do you have access to, or would you like access to loans? I work with multiple franchise loan companies that assist you with that. So what happens from there is, that I basically able to refer to my partners who work with individuals that do small business administration loans, even rollovers out of retirement accounts. You can actually utilize that to even fund your franchise. And now a new thing that has come up, which is a great opportunity as well. Many people don't know about this, but you can actually have unsecured term loans, fixed interest for a certain amount of period that actually get you started in your business. So financing, many people see it as a hurdle. However, one of the things I do with my clients is I talk to you first about the capital requirements, and then we kind of understand what kind of franchise is going to be best for you based on that requirement, and then be able to get you in front of the right people to get that capital to start the business.
Right. So what would be some low entry areas when it comes to franchising? Obviously, you hear, and I've heard over the years, owning one McDonald's isn't going to get you there. You have to own multiple.
Right.
But then owning multiple McDonald's, first of all, just to get in the door is not, it's not a cakewalk.
Right.
So where would you say the low hanging fruit is versus going to a McDonald's or a Burger King?
Well, that's a great question. So the lowest hanging fruit, I would say, is going to be probably in that $10,000 range.
Okay.
There's opportunity in the travel space for that. There's consultant, exercise, fitness areas as well. And those are home-based models.
Okay.
So that's where the capital requirement comes down lower. And then, like you mentioned, yes, you can go all the way up into the McDonald's, which are 1.2, 1.3, and then we go all the way up to 4 million. There's entertainment complexes for kids, those huge entertainment complexes.
Extremes.
Yes, exactly. Urban air, all that. Those are 4 million plus. So if you could look at that, 10,000 to 4 million, there's a huge amount of opportunity in there. But on average, the average one, you're looking at probably about 125 and less, $125,000 and less.
And what would be in that area?
A huge amount of opportunity. Electrical, plumbing, AC, digital marketing consultant, fitness, you name it. The entertainment, the huge amount of opportunity.
When you say entertainment, talk about that a little bit. That's interesting to me. I have a personal reason, but anyway.
So there's a lot of opportunity there, and what we're talking about is like children's entertainment. So the children's entertainment area, where basically you are able to host parties for them, and they're educational and that concept. So that's where we find a lot of areas there, because a lot of people nowadays are looking for activities for their children and to keep them entertained. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there, as well as in the tutoring space.
Okay.
And that also lines within that investment range.
Well, it sounds like pretty much any business or idea, obviously, that you may have can be franchised.
That is key. That is true. We also help businesses to become franchises as well.
That side of it. So someone started a business, they have a good niche, no one else is doing it.
Right.
So that's another conversation in itself.
That's a whole nother area. And one of the things we do there with our clients with that is that we talk to them first about, we look at the profitability of the business, because when you're going to franchise the business, you have to ensure that there's enough profit on there that you can still have a royalty and grow the business for your franchisees. So that's another whole nother facet of the business, and that's an opportunity that we help people with as well.
Okay. So what would we say in this little bit of time we have left, what a person should first start thinking about if they're thinking about getting into a franchise?
Sure, great question. One of the first things they need to think about is who they're going to work with. Many people don't work with anyone. They talk to family and friends. They see the store, they see the lines, and they don't understand the back end of it, understanding the P&L, the profit and loss statements, understanding the time commitment and the capital requirements. And one of the first things you want to do is talk to someone like myself, the franchise brokerage consultant, that has access to multiple franchises. Okay. So that allows me to be unbiased. I don't work for one franchise, I work for multiple, and be able to help them with that.
So how can someone get in touch with you?
Sure. It's my company's www.thefranchiseexecutive.com, or Andre at The Franchise Executive, or 954-604-1830.
Man, this time has gone by too quick. We got to do this again. So this has been the Member Connection, the Miami Dade Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.